The royal hatchery was warm, almost too warm for most creatures. Giant heat lamps hung from the ceiling, casting orange light across the smooth stone floor. In the center of the massive room, 12 eggs sat on beds of glowing coals. Each egg was larger than a grown man, with shells that shimmered in different colors. Emperor Vexthor walked slowly between the eggs. His red scales caught the light as he moved. He was the most powerful dragon in the galaxy, ruler of 12 star systems. His wings were folded against his back, each one large enough to block out the sun. When he breathed, small wisps of smoke escaped his nostrils. Today was hatching day. The Emperor always came to watch the new dragons enter the world. It was tradition, something his father had done and his father before him. Dragons valued strength above all else, and hatching day showed which younglings would grow to be mighty warriors. The first egg cracked. A large piece of shell fell away and a dark green snout pushed through. The baby dragon inside roared and a small jet of flame shot from its mouth. The Emperor nodded with approval. Strong lungs, good fire. This one would do well. One by one the eggs opened. Each baby dragon that emerged showed the signs of power. They breathed fire within moments of breaking free from their shells. They spread their wings, testing them, preparing for their first flight. Some were red, some were gold, some were deep purple. All of them were perfect examples of dragon strength, all except one. The smallest egg sat at the edge of the coal bed. Its shell was white, not the usual bright colors. The Emperor had almost forgotten it was there. Now, as all the other hatchlings chirped and played, this last egg began to crack. The shell split slowly, much slower than the others. A tiny dragon tumbled out, landing on his face in the ashes. He was pale blue, almost see-through in the harsh light. When he opened his mouth to roar like his brothers and sisters had done, nothing came out. Just a small cough and a puff of gray smoke. The master of hatchlings, an old scarred dragon named Cross, approached the Emperor. His voice was quiet, respectful. "My lord, that one appears to be defective." The word hung in the air like poison. Defective. In the Dragon Empire, there was no worse thing to be. Dragons were perfect. Dragons were power. A dragon that could not fly, could not breathe fire, was not really a dragon at all. The tiny blue hatchling tried to stand. His legs wobbled beneath him. His wings, much too small for even his tiny body, fluttered uselessly. He looked up at the towering form of the Emperor with bright golden eyes. There was no fear in those eyes, only curiosity. "What happens to defective hatchlings?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. Cross hesitated. "My lord, the old laws are clear. Those who cannot fly or breathe fire cannot serve the Empire. They are removed. A gentle word for a harsh reality. Defective dragons were taken to the cold mountains and left there. They did not survive long." The Emperor stared at the small creature. The hatchling stared back. Then, despite his weak legs, the little dragon took a step forward, then another. He walked right up to the Emperor's massive clawed foot and sat down, leaning against it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Something strange happened in that moment. Emperor Vexthor, who had conquered planets and destroyed fleets, who had never shown mercy to an enemy, felt something shift inside his chest. This tiny broken creature showed no fear. He sought comfort, connection, warmth. "His name is Spark," the Emperor said suddenly. Cross's eyes widened. "My lord, if you name him, then he is officially recognized as your son. The court will know. The Empire will know. They will see weakness in the royal family. His name is Spark," the Emperor repeated, his voice harder now. "He will stay in the palace. No one outside this room will know of his condition. That is an order." Cross bowed low, his wings spreading in a gesture of submission. "As you command, my lord." The Emperor reached down and carefully picked up Spark. The hatchling was so light, so fragile. He fit in the Emperor's palm easily. Spark made a small sound, something between a purr and a chirp, and curled up against the warm scales of his father's hand. In that moment, Emperor Vexthor made a decision that would change the fate of the entire galaxy, though he did not know it yet. He would keep his defective son alive. He would hide him from the world. And somehow, some way, he would find a way to fix him. The days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Spark lived in a private chamber deep in the palace where no one went. The Emperor visited when he could, always alone, always in secret. He brought the best doctors, the finest scientists. They examined Spark, ran tests, tried treatments, nothing worked. Spark grew, but slowly. After 6 months, he was the size of a large dog, but his wings remained small and twisted. His chest would heave as he tried to produce fire, but only smoke came out. The scientist had no answers. As far as they could tell, Spark's body simply did not work the way a dragon's body should. The Emperor grew frustrated, then angry, then quietly desperate. He had faced armies and won. He had solved impossible problems, but he could not help his own son. Spark, for his part, seemed unaware that anything was wrong. He played with the toys the Emperor brought him. He learned to understand language faster than any other hatchling. He was clever, friendly, and affectionate. But he was not a dragon, not by the standards of the Empire. The Emperor began to lose hope. Perhaps Cross had been right. Perhaps some things could not be fixed. Then one day everything changed. News arrived that humanity had made first contact with the Empire. Humans were a young species, barely into space, with primitive ships and simple weapons. But they had something the Empire needed, a rare element found only in their solar system. An embassy would be established. Humans would come to the Imperial Palace. Among them would be scientists, diplomats, and specialists of all kinds, including a young man named Danny Cooper, who specialized in solving problems that seemed impossible. A xenobiologist who had saved dying species on 6 different worlds. Someone who never gave up no matter how hopeless things appeared. The Emperor did not know about Danny Cooper yet. He had no reason to care about one human among many, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. And sometimes the answer to an impossible problem comes from the most unexpected place. Part 2, the human ships arrived on a clear morning. They were small compared to the massive dragon warships that filled the sky above the imperial capital. To the dragons watching from below, the human vessels looked like toys, fragile things that might break if you breathed on them too hard. But Emperor Vexthor had given orders that the humans were to be treated with respect. They had something the Empire needed, and besides, it cost nothing to be polite to a species that posed no threat. Danny Cooper stood in the landing bay, trying not to show how nervous he felt. He was young, only 30 years old, with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He wore the standard uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, which felt too tight around his neck. Around him, the other members of the human delegation whispered and pointed at everything they saw. The dragons were huge. Danny had seen pictures, read reports, studied their biology for months. None of it prepared him for the reality of standing next to a creature that could crush him with one foot. The dragons moved with grace despite their size, their scales catching the light like living jewels. A dragon with gray scales and a nasty scar across his snout approached the humans. His name was Cross, and he was the master of ceremonies. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Welcome to the Imperial Palace. You will follow me to your quarters. You will not wander without permission. You will not enter restricted areas. Tomorrow the trade negotiations begin." The humans nodded quickly. No one wanted to make the giant dragon angry. Their quarters were in the east wing of the palace, in rooms that had been hastily modified for creatures much smaller than dragons. The ceilings were still too high, the doors too large, but beds had been brought in that were the right size for humans. Danny dropped his bag on his bed and looked around. The room was plain but clean, with a window that looked out over the city. He should have been tired. The journey had taken weeks and the time difference was confusing. But Danny's mind was racing. Somewhere in this palace were dragons, real living dragons, and he had 1,000 questions about their biology, their evolution, their social structure. Sleep was impossible. Around midnight, Danny gave up trying. He pulled on his clothes and stepped into the hallway. It was empty and quiet. The palace was so large that sound seemed to disappear into the distance. Danny knew he was not supposed to wander, but his curiosity was stronger than his common sense. He promised himself he would only walk a little just to see. He followed corridors that twisted and turned. The palace was like a maze, built for creatures that could fly over obstacles rather than walk around them. Danny was completely lost within 10 minutes, but he did not care. Everything was fascinating. The walls were carved with scenes of dragon history. The floors were smooth stone that felt warm under his feet. Then he heard something, a small sound like crying. It was faint, almost hidden by the silence of the palace. Danny stopped and listened. There it was again. Something or someone was in distress. He followed the sound down a narrow hallway that looked like it was rarely used. Dust covered the floor and the lights were dim. At the end of the hall was a door with an electronic lock. The crying sound was coming from behind it. Danny knew he should not do what he was thinking. This was clearly a private area. But that sound, it pulled at something in his chest. Something needed help. He pulled out his multi-tool, a device every scientist carried. It had dozens of functions, including a basic code breaker. Danny had used it before to get into locked labs when he forgot his keycard. His hands shook as he worked on the lock. This was different from forgetting a keycard. This was breaking into a restricted area of an alien palace. The lock clicked open. Danny pushed the door open slowly. The room beyond was large and comfortable, filled with soft cushions and strange toys. And there in the corner was a dragon, but not like the dragons Danny had seen before. This one was small, barely bigger than a large dog. His scales were pale blue and seemed too thin, almost transparent. His wings were folded against his back, and even Danny could tell they were wrong somehow, too small and twisted. The little dragon looked up when Danny entered. His golden eyes went wide with surprise. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Hey there," Danny said softly, crouching down to make himself less threatening. "Are you okay?" The dragon tilted his head, studying this strange creature. Danny was not like the other dragons who came to visit. He was small, soft, with no scales or claws. But his voice was kind, and kindness was something the little dragon had not experienced much of. Slowly, carefully, the dragon approached. He sniffed at Danny's outstretched hand, then made a sound like a purr. Danny felt his heart melt. This creature, whatever was wrong with him, was just lonely. "What are you doing in here all by yourself?" Danny asked, reaching out to gently scratch behind the dragon's ear ridges. The dragon leaned into the touch, clearly enjoying it. The dragon tried to show Danny his wings. He spread them out, or tried to, but they barely extended. Danny could see the frustration in those golden eyes. The dragon huffed, and a small puff of smoke came from his nostrils. "You want to fly, don't you?" Danny said, his scientist brain already working. "And breathe fire." "But something's not right," the dragon chirped, a sound of agreement. For the first time in his life, someone seemed to understand. Danny was examining the dragon's wings, noting the bone structure and muscle attachment, when the door exploded inward. 4 guards in heavy armor rushed into the room, weapons drawn and pointed at Danny. He jumped to his feet, hands raised. "I can explain," he started to say. Then Emperor Vexthor himself entered the room. The Emperor was even larger than the other dragons, his presence filling the space. His red scales seemed to glow with inner fire, and his eyes were fixed on Danny with an expression that promised violence. "You dare enter the private chambers of the imperial family?" The Emperor's voice was like thunder. Danny wanted to run, to apologize, to explain. But before he could speak, the little dragon did something unexpected. He ran to Danny's side and pressed against his leg, making protective sounds. It was clear the dragon was trying to defend this stranger who had shown him kindness. Emperor Vexthor stopped. He stared at his son, at Spark, who had never shown such spirit before. The little dragon who usually cowered and hid was standing brave, protecting a human he had just met. "You will come with me," the Emperor said finally, his voice still hard but no longer murderous. "We need to talk. Guards, return to your posts. Speak of this to no one." Danny followed the Emperor, and Spark followed Danny, his small claws clicking on the stone floor. Whatever was about to happen, Danny had a feeling his diplomatic mission had just become much more complicated. But as he looked down at the little dragon walking beside him, at those hopeful golden eyes, he knew he would do whatever it took to help, even if it meant risking everything. Part 3, the Emperor's private study, was unlike anything Danny had ever seen. The walls were covered with star maps that glowed and moved, showing the 12 systems under dragon control. Ancient weapons hung in display cases, swords and spears from the early days before dragons conquered the stars. The room smelled of smoke and old leather. Emperor Vexthor sat on a raised platform designed for his massive size. Danny stood before him, feeling very small and very human. Spark had curled up at Danny's feet, unwilling to leave his side. "If you speak of what you have seen to anyone, your entire delegation will be expelled from the palace," the Emperor said. His voice was cold and controlled. "The trade agreement will fail. Your people will lose access to technology that could advance your civilization by centuries." Danny swallowed hard. "I understand. Do you?" The Emperor leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "That dragon at your feet is my son. He is defective. In our culture, that is a shame beyond measure. If the other houses knew that the imperial family had produced such a creature, they would see it as weakness. There would be challenges to my rule. War, perhaps. He's not defective, Danny said, and immediately wondered if he had just signed his own death warrant. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Explain yourself, human. Danny took a deep breath. This was it. He could back down, apologize, and forget he ever saw Spark. Or he could do what he did best, solve impossible problems. Your Majesty, I'm a xenobiologist. I study alien life forms, specifically how to help species that are struggling. I've worked with creatures on 6 different worlds, animals that everyone said were beyond saving. And I saved them. My scientists are the greatest minds in the galaxy, Vexthor said. They have examined Spark, they have tried everything. What makes you think a primitive human could succeed where they failed? It was a fair question, and Danny had been thinking about the answer since the moment he saw Spark. Because they're thinking like dragons. They're looking at Spark as a broken dragon. I would look at him as a unique organism with specific needs. The Emperor said nothing, so Danny continued, speaking faster now as the ideas tumbled out. Every species I've studied has factors that influence development. Environment, nutrition, social bonding. Your scientists probably tested genetic therapies, right? Maybe surgery, maybe drugs to stimulate growth? Yes, the Emperor admitted. But did they test different diets? Different environmental conditions? Did they consider that maybe Spark needs something specific that he's not getting? The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Danny could see him thinking, weighing options. Pride against desperation, hope against caution. What would you need? Vexthor asked finally. Time, access to Spark, permission to run tests, non-invasive ones, and information about dragon development, the kind of details your scientists would know. If you fail, then I'll leave and never speak of this. You have my word, and if you succeed, the Emperor's eyes were sharp. What do you want in return? Danny had not thought that far ahead. He looked down at Spark, who was watching him with such trust and hope. Nothing, just the chance to help him. That's enough. Emperor Vexthor studied the young human for a long time. He had lived for centuries, had negotiated with warlords and merchants, had learned to spot lies. But he saw no deception in Danny Cooper's eyes. Only genuine desire to help. 1 month, the Emperor said. You will work with Spark in secret. His chamber will become your workspace. No one else can know what you are doing. If you fail, you will return to your delegation and forget this happened. If you betray this trust, the consequences will be severe for you and your entire species. I won't fail, Danny said with more confidence than he felt, and I won't betray you. The Emperor stood, and even though Danny expected it, the sheer size of the dragon still took his breath away. We will see. Cross will bring you whatever equipment you need. You have 1 month, Danny Cooper. Use it well. The next morning, Danny sent a message to the head of the human delegation saying he had been assigned to a special research project. It was not quite a lie. Then he threw himself into work with an intensity that surprised even him. Spark's chamber was transformed. Danny brought in scanning equipment, chemistry sets, sample collectors. He covered the walls with notes and diagrams. He studied every aspect of Spark's biology, taking tissue samples, recording vital signs, observing behavior. The more he learned, the more pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Dragon hatchlings, Danny discovered, normally spent their first months in volcanic regions. The heat, the minerals in the air, the sulfur compounds, all of it was essential for proper development. But Spark had been kept in the palace, hidden away in comfortable rooms with normal temperatures. Even more important, young dragons learned by watching their parents and siblings. Flying was not just instinct. It was a skill that had to be taught, practiced, refined. Fire breathing involved complex muscle control that hatchlings learned by mimicking adults. Spark had been alone his entire life. No role models, no teachers. Just isolation and confusion about why his body would not do what it was supposed to do. You're not broken, Danny told him one evening as they sat together. Spark had his head in Danny's lap, making contented sounds as Danny scratched behind his ear ridges. You just needed the right environment and someone to teach you. Spark made a questioning chirp. Yeah, I know. I can't fly or breathe fire either. But I can help you learn. We'll figure it out together. Danny built heat lamps that mimicked volcanic vents. He created a special diet rich in sulfur and metallic minerals, that young dragons would normally get from their environment. He designed exercises to strengthen Spark's wings, starting small and building up gradually. But the most important thing Danny provided was something that could not be measured or quantified. He gave Spark attention, affection, and belief. He celebrated every small success and offered comfort during every setback. He talked to Spark constantly, explaining what they were doing and why. He became the family Spark had never had. After 2 weeks, Spark's wings were visibly stronger. His scales had taken on a deeper, healthier color. He was more active, more playful. The sad, lonely creature Danny had first met was transforming into something brighter, but he still could not fly. And he still could not breathe fire. Danny tried everything he could think of. He rigged up a harness system that would let Spark practice wing movements while supported. He researched the chemical reactions involved in fire breathing and tried to stimulate the right organs. He consulted with dragon scientists through Cross, asking questions without revealing why he needed the information. The month was almost over. Danny was running out of time and ideas. He sat in the chamber late one night, surrounded by failed experiments and dead-end theories, and felt despair creeping in. Maybe the dragon scientists had been right. Maybe some things could not be fixed. Spark approached him and nudged his hand with his snout. The dragon made a soft sound, almost like he was trying to comfort Danny instead of the other way around. "I'm not giving up on you," Danny said, pulling Spark close. "I promised I'd help you, and I will somehow." Spark purred and settled next to him. They sat together in comfortable silence, human and dragon, both hoping for a miracle that seemed just out of reach. Part 4. 3 weeks into the month, something changed. Danny had set up a practice area in the largest part of Spark's chamber. Raised platforms at different heights gave Spark targets to aim for. The harness system Danny built hung from the ceiling, ready to catch Spark if he fell. They practiced every day. Short hops at first, with Danny supporting most of Spark's weight through the harness. Spark would flap his wings, building muscle and coordination. Sometimes they managed a few feet before Spark got tired. Other times he barely left the ground, but Spark never gave up. And neither did Danny. On this particular morning, Danny was adjusting the harness straps when Spark suddenly pulled away. Before Danny could react, the little dragon leaped toward a platform 15 feet away. His wings spread wide, wider than they had ever been before, catching the air. For 3 full seconds, Spark glided. No harness, no support, just dragon and air and the pure joy of flight. He landed on the platform with a thump, not graceful but successful. For a moment there was silence. Then Spark let out a sound of pure triumph, somewhere between a roar and a laugh. Danny shouted with joy, jumping up and down. "You did it! Spark, you flew! You actually flew!" Spark launched himself again, this time making it even farther. He wobbled in the air, his technique was rough, but he was flying under his own power. Danny watched with tears in his eyes as his friend soared around the chamber, getting stronger with each attempt. Over the next few days, the flights got longer, higher, more controlled. Spark's wings were finally developing properly, his muscles responding to the training. He started to look like a real dragon, graceful and powerful in the air. Danny documented everything, filling notebooks with observations and measurements. But his notes were mixed with personal thoughts, comments about how proud he felt watching Spark succeed. The fire was still a problem. Danny understood the biology. Dragons had special organs in their chest and throat that produced flammable gas. The gas was ignited by a spark created from minerals stored in specialized glands. It was complex, elegant, and in Spark's case, completely non-functional. The organs were there. Danny had confirmed that with scans. They just would not activate. Danny tried everything. Special breathing exercises, dietary supplements, even meditation techniques, though he felt silly teaching meditation to a dragon. Nothing worked. "Come on, buddy," Danny encouraged one afternoon. "I know you can do this. Feel it deep in your chest. You're a dragon. You have fire inside you." Spark huffed and puffed. Smoke billowed from his nostrils, thick and dark. But no flame came. He looked at Danny with frustration, his golden eyes full of disappointment. "It's okay," Danny said quickly, kneeling beside his friend. "We'll figure it out. You learn to fly. You'll learn this too. Just takes time." But time was something they were running out of. The month was almost over. That night, Danny was woken by alarms. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the palace. painting everything in blood-colored shadows. He heard shouting, the sound of weapons firing, and something that sounded like explosions in the distance. He ran to the window. Outside, ships were descending from the sky. They were sleek and dark, with markings Danny did not recognize. This was not a friendly visit. The door to Spark's chamber burst open. 3 figures in heavy armor stormed in, weapons raised. They were not dragons. These creatures were shorter, with gray skin and too many joints in their arms. Danny had read about them in the briefing files. Krethkai, a species that hated the Dragon Empire and fought constant border wars. Well, the leader said in a hissing voice. What do we have here? A human and the Emperor's little secret? Danny moved instinctively, placing himself between the intruders and Spark. Get out. You have no right to be here, the Krethkai laughed. We have every right. We are taking this palace, and you two will make perfect hostages. The great Emperor Vexthor, brought low by his defective son. The galaxy will laugh at him. They raised their weapons, advanced toward Danny and Spark. Danny had no weapons, no way to fight back. He was just a scientist, unarmed and terrified, but he stood his ground. Spark moved up beside Danny, and the human felt heat building next to him. The little dragon was growling, a sound Danny had never heard before. It started deep in Spark's chest and grew louder, more intense. Spark, no, Danny said, afraid his friend would get hurt trying to protect him. But Spark was not afraid. For the first time in his life, he was angry. These creatures were threatening Danny, the one person who had believed in him, who had helped him, who had become his family. And something inside Spark, something primal and ancient, woke up. What's it going to do? One of the Krethkai mocked. I can't even breathe. The words died as Spark roared, and this time flame exploded from his jaws. It was not a small jet of fire or a gentle stream. It was a torrent of blue-white flame, hotter than anything Danny had seen. The fire engulfed all 3 attackers and they screamed. Their armor began to melt. They turned and ran, leaving scorch marks on the floor and the smell of burning metal in the air. The chamber fell silent. Smoke drifted through the room. Spark stood there, his sides heaving, smoke still trailing from his nostrils. He turned to look at Danny, his eyes wide with surprise at what he had just done. You did it, Danny breathed. When it mattered most, when you needed to protect someone you cared about, you did it. Spark made a small sound, almost like a question. Did I really just breathe fire? Yes, Danny said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, you did. The door opened again and Danny tensed, but this time it was Emperor Vexthor. The Emperor was in full battle armor, blood on his claws from fighting the invaders. Royal guards flanked him, weapons ready. Vexthor took in the scene. The burn marks on the floor, the melted armor fragments, his son standing tall and proud, smoke still rising from his nostrils. The palace is secure, the Emperor said. The attackers have been repelled. His eyes fixed on Spark and something in his expression softened. Did he? He breathed fire, Danny confirmed, and he could not keep the pride from his voice. Real fire. And he's been flying for over a week now. Your son isn't defective, Your Majesty. He never was. Emperor Vexthor approached slowly. Spark did not cower or hide like he used to. He stood tall, his wings partially spread, meeting his father's gaze with confidence. Show me, the Emperor said softly. Spark looked at Danny, who nodded encouragingly. Then the little dragon launched himself into the air. His wings caught him easily, and he soared around the chamber in graceful loops. He flew high, did a barrel roll that made Danny's heart skip, and landed on a perch near the ceiling. From there, Spark opened his jaws and released another stream of brilliant blue fire. It lit up the entire chamber, beautiful and terrible and perfect. Emperor Vexthor stood speechless. He had ruled for centuries, had conquered worlds, had seen wonders across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, watching his son finally become what he was meant to be. How? The Emperor asked, turning to Danny. Danny shrugged, smiling. He just needed the right environment, the right training, and someone who believed in him. The strength was always there. He just needed help finding it. Spark flew down and landed between them. He looked at his father, then at Danny, then back at his father. For the first time, he felt complete. He could fly. He could breathe fire. He was a dragon, truly and finally, and he had a human to thank for it. Emperor Vexthor knelt down, something he had never done for anyone, and touched his snout gently to Spark's forehead. My son, he said quietly, I am sorry I doubted you. I am sorry I hid you away. "You are worthy of the name dragon, and I am proud to call you mine." Spark chirped happily and nuzzled against both his father and Danny. His family, both parts of it, finally together. Part 5, the invasion had been small. Just a raid meant to embarrass the Empire rather than conquer it. The Krethkai had wanted to capture something valuable, proof that even the mighty dragons could be hurt. They had known about Spark somehow, about the Emperor's hidden shame instead. They had given Spark his moment of triumph. 3 days after the attack, Emperor Vexthor called a meeting of the Grand Council. This was unusual. The council only met for the most important matters, when decisions needed to be made that would affect the entire empire. Dragons from all 12 systems came to the palace, powerful nobles and military commanders who had served for centuries. Danny stood in a side chamber with Spark, both of them nervous. The Emperor had told them to wait here until they were called. Through the walls they could hear the rumble of dragon voices, hundreds of them, all wondering why they had been summoned. "You okay?" Danny asked, scratching behind Spark's ear ridges the way he liked. Spark made a worried sound. He had never been in front of the council before. He had never been in front of any large group. The only dragons who knew he existed were his father and a few trusted guards. "Whatever happens," Danny said, "I'm proud of you. You've come so far." The door opened and Cross, the scarred old dragon, gestured for them to follow. Danny's heart hammered in his chest as they walked down the corridor toward the council chamber. The sounds grew louder, the voices more distinct. They emerged into the largest room Danny had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of dragons filled the space, arranged in rows that rose up like an amphitheater. Their scales caught the light in every color imaginable: red, gold, green, blue, purple, bronze. The combined power in this room could destroy planets. Every eye turned to look at the small human and the pale blue dragon walking beside him. Emperor Vexthor sat on a throne at the center of the chamber. He stood when he saw them, his presence commanding instant silence. "Dragons of the Empire," the Emperor's voice rang out, filling every corner of the vast space. "For too long we have believed that strength comes only from power. From fire and claw and wing, we have defined ourselves by conquest, by dominance, by perfection." He gestured towards Spark, who stood frozen beside Danny. "This is my son, Spark. I hid him from you because I believed he was broken. I was ashamed because he could not fly, could not breathe fire. By our standards, he was worthless." Murmurs rippled through the council, dragons turning to each other, whispering, pointing at the small dragon who stood so different from them all. "I was wrong," the Emperor continued. "Spark was not broken. He simply needed someone who could see past our assumptions, someone who could approach the problem differently." Vexthor looked at Danny. "This human, one of the species we dismissed as primitive, did what our greatest scientists could not. Danny Cooper spent 1 month with my son, just 1 month, and in that time, he helped Spark learn to fly and breathe fire." The murmurs grew louder, disbelief and curiosity mixing together. "The human asks nothing in return," the Emperor said. "He helped my son because he cared, because he saw value where we saw only failure. This is why I am proposing a formal alliance with humanity, not as subjects or servants but as equals." The chamber erupted, dragons arguing with each other, some shouting in agreement, more roaring in opposition. How could they ally with such a weak species? How could humans be considered equals? This was madness, a mistake, an insult to everything the Empire stood for. Danny wanted to run. This was too much. Too many powerful beings, too much anger in their voices. But he felt Spark press against his leg and he stayed. Then Spark did something incredible. He spread his wings and launched himself into the air. Every dragon in the chamber fell silent, watching as the small blue dragon flew in graceful circles around the vast space. He was beautiful in flight, his movements confident and strong. Spark flew to the center of the chamber, hovering in midair. Then he opened his jaws and released a column of blue-white flame that reached all the way to the ceiling. The fire was brilliant, hotter and brighter than most dragons could produce. It lit up the entire chamber, impossible to ignore. He landed on a raised platform and spoke. His voice was young but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "I was nothing until Danny believed in me. He gave me hope when I had none. He taught me that being different is not the same as being weak. If humans can transform what we thought impossible, imagine what we could accomplish together." It was the most any of them had heard Spark speak. The young dragon who they had just learned existed was challenging them, making them think, forcing them to reconsider. Slowly, the opposition quieted. Dragons respected strength, and Spark had just demonstrated both power and wisdom. More importantly, he had shown them what human ingenuity could do. The council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The alliance with humanity was approved. The months that followed changed everything. Danny became a permanent advisor to the Empire, though he still made regular trips back to Earth to visit his family. He worked with dragon scientists, sharing human methods of problem-solving, teaching them to think differently about challenges they faced. But more than anything, he remained Spark's friend and mentor. They spent time together every day, talking, playing, exploring the palace. As Spark grew, he never forgot the human who had changed his life. Spark became something unique in the Empire. He was a bridge between dragon and human cultures. He understood both, valued both, and worked to bring them together. Under his father's guidance and Danny's friendship, he became a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. The human-dragon alliance flourished. Human creativity combined with dragon strength created advances neither species could have achieved alone. Trade routes opened. Scientific exchanges began. Cultural understanding grew. Together, they became the most powerful partnership in the galaxy. And when other species looked at them with fear or jealousy, they saw not just military might, but the potential for growth, for change, for becoming something greater than they had been before. Years passed. Spark grew into a magnificent dragon, larger than Danny had imagined possible. His pale blue scales now shimmered like water, and his fire burned brighter than stars. He became a leader in the Empire, respected for his wisdom and his unique perspective. But he never outgrew the chamber where he had lived as a hatchling. It was preserved exactly as it had been, now a monument to the friendship that changed two civilizations. Spark returned there often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Danny. On one such visit, when Spark was fully grown and Danny had gray in his hair, they sat together looking at the old training equipment, the notebooks filled with observations, the marks on the floor where Spark had first breathed fire. "Do you ever regret it?" Spark asked, his voice now deep and resonant. "You could have returned to Earth after the first month. You could have lived a normal life. Instead, you stayed here with me." Danny laughed, reaching up to scratch the dragon's snout the way he used to when Spark was small enough to fit in his arms. "Regret? I helped a dragon learn to fly and breathe fire. I became best friends with a prince who is changing the galaxy. I got to be part of something bigger than myself. What could possibly be more meaningful than that?" Spark rumbled with contentment, a sound like distant thunder. The vibration made Danny smile. "Thank you, Danny, for seeing what I could become when no one else did." "You always had it in you," Danny replied. "I just helped you find it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching through the window as human and dragon ships moved through the sky together, heading out to explore new worlds. The Empire was different now, better because one human had refused to give up on one dragon. Danny thought about that first night, when he had heard crying and followed it to a locked door. What would have happened if he had just gone back to his quarters? If he had ignored that sound, the alliance might never have formed. Spark might have lived his whole life believing he was broken, but he had not ignored it. He had followed his curiosity and his compassion, and everything changed because of it. "You know what the funny thing is?" Danny said. "I almost didn't come on this mission. I was scared. I thought I was not good enough, not smart enough. I almost let someone else take my place." Spark turned to look at him. "I am very glad you did not." "Me too, buddy. Me too." Outside, a young dragon flew past the window, a human scientist riding on his back, both of them laughing. It was a common sight now, but it still made Danny smile. The future they had built together, one act of kindness at a time. That was the human difference. Not superior technology or military might, not even intelligence, though humans had plenty of that. It was the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. To approach challenges with creativity instead of force. To believe in people or dragons even when they had stopped believing in themselves. And sometimes that simple difference was enough to change the entire galaxy.